My name is Tara Clapper, and I designed this digital live action role playing game. We are in a sci fi setting in the future at the end of the century, and our characters are prepping to get on a spaceship that is launched after a few other ships in the same universe. And it is a generational ship, so we are actually meeting as our characters the other people that we will live and die with on the ship. Just a few of the 266 passengers aboard the ship. And but before we begin, we're going to tell you just a little bit about us and our characters. So again, I'm Tara. I made this crazy game. It's kind of become a thing with multiple runs, and that's kind of the deal. I'm playing Captain Emily O'Sullivan, which is a character that you may have seen me play in other runs, and that's because Emily is not just one person, but there are multiple artificial intelligence units of Emily. So most ships have an Emily in some capacity. This is the ZETA version, so a lot of the different Emilys will have all the same memories as each other up to a certain point. And then they have this like divergence. And this is ZETA. So, they get updated and stuff like that. Emily ZETA has only learned that that she's AI. She only learned that a few weeks ago. She thought she was a person. So she's coping with that. She's got some war veteran stuff going on. Fairly typical for somebody who's been through that kind of thing. And that's the nature of Emily. So with that, I will pass it on to Corey.
Hi, I'm Corey. I'm excited to play this LARP. I'm playing. He is the XO of this particular chariot. He was brought here on request by Captain Emily O'Sullivan, perhaps the original Captain Emily O'Sullivan, but who knows? He is a military man. He grew up on Mars and received a battlefield commission and worked his way up the ranks in a more or less reasonably famous war. Not like on the words of everybody around the world, but he's within military service. Yeah. So there we go.
All right, JS.
Hi, I am JS, and I am playing Lamar Northrop, who's the civilian relations expert. Basically the person in charge of, since we have a strong civilian and military population, and academic for that matter, on the chariot systems of keeping everyone happy and not at each other's throats. Lamar has a sort of very checkered past, a short stint in the military, but also a lot of other different jobs that sort of prepared him for a role that they kind of had a trouble figuring out who would be in this role otherwise. And he's maybe a little bit less thrilled in some ways to be going on it, but sees it as a unique opportunity.
Awesome. Brandon.
My character is Christopher Davies, Kit, to people who know him well. He's from the military with a technical background in automation, computer software and hardware. And he has signed on somewhat late to the Chariot project as a second assistant. It was a roster post that was opened because of a dropout and filled very recently.
Excellent. Well, thank you for all the intros. To those watching, I notice we do have a few viewers. If you have any questions, once we go in character, you can actually ask us and interact with us as your character by typing it into the Twitch chat, and I'll be monitoring that the whole time. I actually look at it on my phone, and I'll go ahead and present any appropriate questions to the crew when time permits. And we'll talk about it and answer it. Feel free to antagonize us. Don't be like entirely too explicit or rude. But this is a free-form LARP, so jump in, yes, and with us, and we'll roll with it. I love it. We all do. Just go ahead and toss some stuff in there. The other thing I want to mention to the people watching this either live or as a video is that we also use Discord. So that means, we're communicating with each other, and you'll see us typing from time to time or being on our phones. That's because we are communicating out of game. We're doing consent negotiations. We are just, always kind of in communication, and you won't see a lot of the emotional safety techniques we're using because we're using them on Discord. We're checking in with each other, saying, hey, is it okay if I do this? Being very clear that it's a consent negotiation. And the other thing is, there's an in-game section on Discord as well. And we may use it, we may not, but sometimes stuff happens in-game in that Discord chat. Usually you don't get to see that as a viewer, but you might hear us refer to it. You might see us typing. You might hear us talking about, like, check your feed. That means we're just kind of looking at Discord, and you don't get to see everything, but if you would like to see stuff, you could play Chariot and just kind of join in the fun. You can find more about that at geekinitiative.com. We're going to be releasing some more runs soon for 2018. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start. And when I do that, I flip this little thing up top here to say that we are in-game. So if you do have any out-of-game questions for us, we'll get to them, just not, immediately. If you have in-game questions for us, you'll probably hear me address those with the crew pretty quickly. Okay, so I have flipped it over to in-game. We are live, we are streaming, and we are beginning. 3, 2, 1, game on. Welcome, everybody, to Chariot ZETA. I hope you've all had a restful weekend before the work really begins here. We have a lot to sort out. I know most of you, seen most of you at least in passing. Haven't seen some of you in a while. It'll be interesting to work with all of you. I have my water here. I don't know about you, but I was out drinking last night. Because that's what you do on a Saturday. And that's what you do when you have a long, tough mission ahead. So, forgive me if I'm slightly hungover, but I promise I'm completely competent and capable and ready to go here. I've also recently been updated with, how the other missions are doing. I do want to begin by making sure that everyone is aware of the level of danger and commitment here, as the first captain of Chariot Epsilon, before the crew even met each other, was murdered by a hacker known as Rogue Mistress. So we'll want to be on the lookout for that. Yeah. So, don't get murdered. Welcome to Chariot. Hi. How's everyone doing?
Well, I suppose that's an easy to follow first order.
Yeah. Since you're the XO, why don't we just get started with some introductions to each other here. I think most of you know who I am, unfortunately. But we don't all know each other necessarily, so feel free to give an intro.
Sure. I am Commander Lucas Voracek. I will be the XO on this mission. So come to me first if you have a problem that needs to be dealt with, or I'll come to you first if a problem needs to be dealt with. Suppose that's all I really have to say.
Yeah, don't bring those crappy little problems to me. But those of you who have served in the military or have worked with the military before, which should include all of you, know how it works. So I don't like being annoyed with pesky little details. I like high-level things, big issues, what is, mission-related purposes only. I don't do fun. I don't do hobbies. I don't do dinner, okay? I do drinking and water the next day. Fantastic. Next.
Well, you can take all your sort of more hobby and Julie, the cruise director, problems to me. I'm Lamar Northrop. I am the civilian relations expert here, so I am in charge of keeping the rest of the ship that's not so knowledgeable in the ways of military as we are, in line and in shape, and making sure that all communication lines are kept open, so to speak. And it's an honor to be serving with you all.
Fantastic. It sounds like you handle a lot of those annoying details, i.e. civilians, that I don't like to deal with. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you. Great. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Next.
Commander Borchek, I'm Captain Davies reporting for duty. Captain, good to see you again.
It's been a while.
Yes, I watched the news a little bit.
Yeah, I hope you've been coping.
You know how it is.
Yeah.
I put the extra cargo that I had on D deck. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's it should be good. It's good to hear a familiar voice.
Is this something I can make sure it gets allocated in the right place, or something like that?
Oh, Commander, no, it seemed that D deck was the most suitable for you, Commander. I can have it moved if necessary. Just let me know.
So, yeah, it's been a while. Why don't you tell our other crew exactly what it is you'll be working with on the ship?
I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I thought that was on Manifest. I'm in charge of automation systems on board ship. So I basically oversee the engineering staff taking care of the computer hardware and software. I'm sure you're all familiar with the list of automated systems on board ship. It's about as long as your arm, and our objective is to make sure that you never have to pay any attention to them, whatever.
Fantastic.
They should just do their job and be otherwise ignorable.
Fantastic.
I can tell you a lot of people on board ship are probably going to be happy that there's at least somebody minding the automated systems. So.
We plan to have. There's always a tech with a DNI. I'm sorry, direct neural interface. Who will be actively monitoring, in addition, of course, to daily reviews, vetting of all upgrades. We don't plan to have another hacker attack.
Excellent, and that's actually the first point of order I really wanted to discuss. Cognizant of the fact that we are, of course, live to the world here. I definitely do want to note that some members of our complement, particularly probably the civilians, the creative types who keep us entertained or whatever it is they're supposed to do, have a lot of concerns about security given what has happened on other chariots. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say that we have it completely in hand, and even though we haven't completely solved the mystery of Rogue Mistress and whatever it is this AI person has done, we are continuously monitoring our systems prior to launch here, and I don't anticipate Rogue Mistress being a problem or trying to kill us or anything like that. Look, I am fairly confident in the abilities of everybody here to either not get themselves killed or to make sure other people don't get killed. And really what it comes down to is if Rogue Mistress is out there, you better step away, or if you're going to try any kind of attack, none of this, secret cyber attack stuff, come at me, right? Fight me. That goes for anyone out there. You have a problem with me, you have a problem with how I handle the battle for London, you have a problem with any of that, come at me, right? We're going to solve that right here and now before we get off of Earth. Because I am stuck drinking this today, okay? Alright, and I guess I just feel like being a little bit honest about that kind of particular intention. So, in terms of security, I guess is there anything we can do to reassure the civilian population that everything is kind of taken care of in terms of security?
Physical security or computer security, Captain?
All of the security.
Yeah, well, I would bounce off that to what the lieutenant's saying, in the sense that I think that the electronic security is much more their primary concern than physical security, which they seem to be relatively okay with.
Yeah, it's completely safe being launched into the unknown, outer space, physically totally safe. They're concerned about the hackers, right? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, well, I think that they presume that since they're all... if there's something I've learned about the artistic and academic mind, it tends to be the thing people focus on, not looking at bad actors amongst them. Whereas, comparatively, I think that of the military mind, people are good at using those bad actors to good purpose. Sheep and sheepdogs, as you will.
That makes sense.
Having as the captain knows, some physical security background as well. I can say this at least, that the exploit that Rogue Mistress used has been recognized, and a patch has been generated to at least close that particular loophole. It's given a review of the systems involved. I don't have any reason to believe that there's another vulnerability of that sort. Of course, access to the shipboard computer systems by any passenger will have to go through, the usual vetting and logging procedure, and unauthorized software will not be installed on ship systems. As far as physical security goes, of course, every passenger and all cargo are subject to a sweep for weaponry and explosives. And only those that are authorized as part of their jobs to have weaponry will be permitted to carry it, and the weapons are ordinarily secured in the central lockup, which is inaccessible to anyone who doesn't have a Type 1 security panel.
Fantastic. I feel safer already, and I don't know.
Nothing special.
Hey, I always carry my sidearm, but that's just me being the captain and all.
Well, no, but you're authorized, and so is the first officer. And there are certain others that can be authorized in a Class A or B emergency to carry a weapon with a
Fantastic. So hopefully those watching and any of our civilian passengers who might have been shaking in their ballet shoes feel a little bit better about hopping on board a ship with us. We have everything in hand. We're completely used to security stuff. I didn't survive the last 20 years by being bad at security or bad at fighting, so I think we're going to be fine. Also, I've been told I should find one of these things called a hobby, because once we launch the ship, right, we're gonna be in space for the rest of our lives. And it's kind of funny. The number one interview question I always get asked for these things is, "What are you gonna do with all that spare time on the ship, Captain O'Sullivan?" And it's just kind of interesting because life here has been day to day. It's been survival. Everything I own fits in one room. I never really anticipated having a particularly long life given my line of work, but I thought maybe it would be really fun if we made some kind of competitive fighting league. What do you think about that?
Like what, something out of Fight Club, or?
Well, no, because we're allowed to talk about it, right? It's not secret. It's like broadcast across the ship. Competitive fighting, like, little known fact about me that the world is not going to know. Well, Kit knows, but I have a little bit of a background as a boxer. Just saying.
Well, I think there's something to that. I mean, it's certainly something that does good physical exercise. Works out the tension. Sometimes they can exist in a ship, especially a long-haul one.
That's true. Definitely need to work out the tension.
It as a spectator sport. Of course, won't get over everyone's taste.
Yeah, that's why we may want to emphasize the more boxing aspects of it than the ultimate fighting or MMA aspects of it, possibly at first, to see actually how it plays out amongst the community.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone will love it in time.
Of course, it will have strict rules, medical staff on call. I'm sure I can draw up associated requirements, make sure that it's safe for all involved.
Well, do we have the room to sort of commit more area for some kind of facility to this effect?
We do have a recreational space as well as several cargo bays that could be converted somewhat easily. We also have a concert space that I can't imagine we'd always be using. So we just share that space with with the creative division. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm glad they could be convinced to lend us some of their space.
Yeah, I think if you sort of packaged in more activities, included things like more sort of parkour and gymnastics and other varieties, so it's more sort of a comprehensive training facility that also has a boxing ring, it might go over better with certain people.
That makes sense. Physical activity is important,
Yeah, it's just maybe a little bit larger commitment of permanent space than I was really aware we actually had room for.
Oh, it's a perfectly large ship. We're trying to bring in 66 people across the stars, but you need a very, very, very large amount of space for all of that. And as a result, you have some pretty large open areas as of the ship.
And keep in mind, we don't have our full crew complement right now. During this, our first generation on board the ship, the ship is built for expansion of our population. We have a little bit of extra room to work with in the here and now. I say we enjoy it, right? It's one of the privileges of being in this first generation. We're going to die in space. We may as well make the most use of it. So, I mean, that's an activity I'd like to bring to the table. Maybe if anybody else has something that might work better with it. Oh, I forgot to mention, after launch, let me check my schedule. 7 days after launch, we have to do a formal thing. I hate these things. It's a formal ceremonial thing where you eat and dance and it gets broadcast back home and that kind of thing. I really don't want to handle the details of that. Who is handling that? Because it's not me.
That would be me, Captain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I do know how to throw a party.
Please let me know exactly what I have to do for this. I'm not looking forward to it. Is there like a speech or something?
Would you like me to write you one?
How about I give you an outline, and then you just take out, let's see, what do they always hate me mentioning on these kind of things? They told me to reduce my mention of alcohol by 74%. So that could be a good guideline for you. Like, look, I'm drinking water today. They also said something about hope and optimism. Toss some of that in there for me, I guess.
Keep it very short, Captain.
Okay, I can do that.
Very pointed.
I'll draft an outline for you. And I'm sure there's some kind of official table, and I'm sure my first and second officers respectively will be expected to say a few words as well. So, gentlemen, please draft something accordingly. We could maybe practice those speeches before we launch, just so that it's not horrible.
And Commander, I can run by you a list of potential supplies that we could have.
Of course, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll draw one of those up right away, sir.
Don't forget bunting.
Something
no question.
We should do I believe, is ensure that we set of spaces for instruction of things that aren't necessarily purely academic. Something like a room for people to practice art, a room for people to practice music. We don't want to lose all of our cultural attachments over the next 100 or so years.
I wonder if it would be secure to have a range there, for practicing with weapons. It feels kind of unsafe, but I feel like we could set that up in a safe way.
It could be possible. We would need to use weapons that aren't particularly powerful.
That's fine. That's just an art I don't think we should have lost. We don't know. Look, we haven't encountered any particular extraterrestrial life out there. We don't know what these other ships are doing. We don't know what kinds of cultures they're going to be developing. I just think it's very important for our descendants to be armed with the necessary knowledge to defend themselves or to assert their particular way of life, if necessary, once they arrive on Proxima B.
Does Proxima have local fauna?
So far we don't know a bunch of details about that. We do know what kinds of plants and animals are kind of growable there. So we don't know what's already there. We do know that a lot of the species from Earth can survive there. So Chariot Epsilon in particular has a very large space devoted to botanical care, and they also have, I don't know if you've ever seen Nate Ruff's TV show. She's kind of a explorer, adventurer, wears a hat, says crikey a lot.
Not familiar with it.
She is actually on board that ship, kind of one of those celebrity things they do now and then. So anyway, she's in charge of bringing animals and genetic material of animals with her. I'm told that we have some genetic material in cryo storage, so I guess we're transporting some of that stuff too. But I don't know that we have any experts of that caliber on board the ship. But the planet itself, I'm told, will be able to sustain that life. I don't know what kind of hunting there is, if that's what you're asking, Kit. There could be some really interesting creatures to track down and subdue for examination and consumption.
So we don't really have any plans to have any living livestock on the way there?
Yeah, there's space for it, so there's someone in charge of that. There's space for it. There's livestock, there's genetic material, there's enough for us to eat. I was speaking with the nutritionist on one of the previous ships, and, she said it was all taken care of, so.
Yeah, well, my concern would be if we're bringing genetic material for livestock and we don't really have any training in veterinary science for a couple generations, that lack of actual real hands-on experience might cause to be a detriment upon landing.
There's a lot of skills we're going to have to improvise a little bit on landing. I mean, fortunately, we have full data archives for a great many, but there's only so much animal husbandry we're going to be able to practice on the ship.
And we do have educators. I think one of the hardest jobs on this ship, and we don't have anybody from the educational division represented here, but I think the educators have some of the hardest jobs, because not only do they do the normal stuff, they educate little kids, they educate teenagers and college students, but they're also, the vocational arts are probably at least as important on this kind of mission as, the traditional forms of education. And, the CEO of Relahart and Company, Lucius Relahart, he certainly values the arts a great deal. That's why we have a creative division, and, preserving our culture is important, or at least the parts of it that, aren't self-destructive anyway. And I respect that, but I think there needs to be at least on our ship, at least on Zeta, I think that there's no harm in having a greater emphasis on these vocational roles that will ensure our descendants' survival. We don't know what these other crews are going to be like by the time they get there. And we don't know what we're going to encounter between here and there. There could be extraterrestrials. There could be things that happen to the ship. I mean, we're probably going to be in a survival situation at one point or another. And being military and being practical, I've just assumed that's why I'm in charge here, right? So, we're going to encounter some stuff on the way, and I think we need to do whatever is necessary. We don't know what these other ships are going to be like. We don't know what aspects of cultures of Earth they're emphasizing or not, and I would just like to be prepared, because the point is to prevent the kind of situation that we have here on Earth. So as long as we're prepared to defend ourselves and manage our own area of this settlement, I think we're going to be fine.
And I'm sure that if the educational representatives don't have something written up about the standards for education, I can certainly figure something out very quickly. I'm sure that we'll have a good set of rules and laws and requirements for the people on board the ship. To some extent, they're not going to have as much freedom as they would in society here on Earth, because there are certain requirements that must be taken into consideration. They will be hurtling through space with no potential way to be saved if something goes wrong.
Yeah, self-sufficiency is important in this circumstance, I think.
And in generally, a less tolerance for screwing things up.
Yeah, just good luck communicating that to the civilians, because they always want some kind of answer where you hold hands and sing songs and stuff, and it's like, come on, people, I have a job to do here.
A lot of times that singing songs and holding hands is their job, Captain.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been told it's important to head off issues like, people go in space, they're never going to see a planet again, at least not set foot on a planet again. I guess it's important for them to have something to look forward to, to have hobbies and jobs and stuff. Like, this whole hobby thing has been stressed to me over and over, and to the Captain Emily's on other ships, I'm told, or so I've seen. Always, what's your hobby? What's your hobby? And the other Emily's, which is a concept I'm still getting used to here, the other Emily's don't know. Because what is our purpose been? It's been war. And now what is our purpose? I don't know. For there to be multiple flawed individuals out there leading these ships so that... Whatever. I don't know. I'm
confused, Captain. I maybe haven't been following the news on this. So, did they copy you?
Kit, you wanna fill him in on that?
Oh, I mean, the publicly available information, for what it's worth, is just that there's Emily O'Sullivan on board each of the chariots. The one on Ada was evidently killed by a hacker, suggesting that she was synthetic and replaced.
I see.
So you have yourself a robot captain.
Well, we can't say that for sure, Captain.
Well, seems pretty likely, doesn't it?
Seems pretty bold move.
I'm actually kind of curious. I was kind of surprised, Kit, to hear from you, given the revelation of all of this AI business about me. That was surprising. In fact, that might have been what led to the last 3 drinks I had last night.
Why, were you talking to someone you knew?
No, I just, Oh, I was drinking alone, my friend. I was drinking alone. Just doing a lot of reflecting. I just thought it was very interesting to have received uh your application.
Yes, well, circumstances made it difficult for me to remain in my existing post, so I was glad of the opportunity.
I understand that is a perfectly logical reason for wanting to be on board, and we're glad to have you here. Right, so moving on. Yes, moving on. So, system of government. We have a provisional system of government that is pretty much up to us on the ship. My recommendation is really just to keep it simple at first, just uh, kind of just maintain a military chain of command. I'm not looking to like run everything, beyond what a captain's normal duties would be. I don't care about the social activities of the ship. That is not my job. But these things like we're discussing, education and the like, they need to have they need to have the adequate authority granted to the people actually in charge of them. They need to function efficiently. I feel like it's going to be easier to run more like a military operation where I can just grant the appropriate power to the people who need to do what they do. Other people are probably going to feel differently. It's probably important to make people feel like they have a voice. There is a direct voting system on board the ship. The idea for that is since there are so few people on the ship, even at our landing, that everybody can have a direct vote on many issues. The positive thing about that is these big issues that come up, big ethical issues that everybody should maybe have a say in. Those kinds of issues we can direct vote on. The bad news is we're going to end up having completely uneducated people deciding on other things. Like, I really shouldn't have a say on even probably like what kind of things people dance to at this gala thing. That is not something I should ever pick, right? But here as a citizen, that might be my vote that week. So I think we really need to discuss if we're going to use this direct voting system, and if so, how. Thoughts on that?
Sure. I actually have a pretty good thought about how provisional government on the ship should be maintained. I would describe it as odd as this might sound, a synchronization of democratic ideals with that of an egalitarian military autonomy. The idea being that people vote for what they want, and the military personnel on the ship are responsible for maintaining order and ensuring that the will of the people is maintained and effectively communicated to those on board. Now, realistically, there are a lot of things that we don't care about. People want to listen to music, they can listen to whatever music they want. People want to throw a party, they can throw whatever parties they want. Realistically, we should have only minor requirements about education. Basically, that people should be educated, that there should be apprenticeships, things like that. Beyond that, most things are within the civilian realm, and as long as they don't interfere with the operation of the ship, it doesn't really matter. Reproduction issues need to be explicitly laid out, that we don't send an empty ship to Proxima Centauri. That's about it.
Commander, with respect, the aliens on board ship.
What?
I don't think a system such as you describe is going to wash with the civilians on board ship. Because it presumes a perfect, intact, functioning, and well-regulated military command. And some of them will argue, have argued already, that there is no procedure for what should happen if the military command develops a problem. You're essentially saying, that civilians will conduct themselves, as as a subsidiary government under a military dictatorship. And I don't think that's going to rest well with a lot of the people here.
What alternatives would you propose?
Well, there has to be. Well, in the U.S. military, while it has a military hierarchy, of course, it is subject ultimately to civilian control. I'm not arguing for something like that necessarily, but there'll have to be a procedure wherein the military, wherein the civilians have some influence or military control or some capability of, replacing officers in the military should they prove to become impaired or otherwise unfit.
Of course, that makes absolute sense.
Yes, but you'll have to have that. Without that, you're basically saying, "Oh, we'll take care of you. Don't worry about it." That's not going to work. You'll have a great deal of unhappiness.
Absolutely. Basically,
even if such procedures are never executed, they have to exist.
I agree wholeheartedly. The only thing that needs to be maintained is that the particular mission of the ship cannot be interfered.
Understood. Well, that's part of the charter of the expedition, and I think probably you want to develop some sort of simple legal framework referent to that charter. But if you or I or the captain should become impaired and unable to carry out our mission, there has to be a means by which that can be rectified.
Absolutely. The civilians will have the ability to elect their own representatives to essentially maintain some level of civility.
There's been an incoming concern on the feed. Lamar, you're going to have to handle this. I'll read the message to you.
Yeah, I didn't see the message too, so yeah. Please go ahead.
The message says, the Civilian Union requests a seat at this discussion immediately. Your ship cannot launch as a military leadership. And then there were some other things too.
Some impolite comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were.
Well, I think the civilian representatives are absolutely required. When I say military leadership, there are certain requirements for the ship to operate without exploding in space or killing everybody on board. Only those things need to be maintained and ensured.
Likewise, I think the civilian union should realize that this is a very preliminary point in our discussion of things as well.
Great. Civilian Union, your concerns are noted. For the record, also, I am drinking H2O today. All right, so we'll need to include the Civilian Union in future discussions about our political and leadership structure. The whole point is to avoid the kind of issues that we have here on Earth right now. I mean, look, I know what my job is, I know what my function is. It's just something that we are required to discuss. So that's the other thing. I will say that, we did agree upon signing on to this mission, and I've had some personal conversations with Lucius Relilhart about this, that, we don't limit resources. So if, within reason, the basics that we need to survive. So food, healthcare, we're not going to limit the kinds of things that people need to survive. It also just isn't practical if the objective is to make it to Proxima B with a full complement of civilians and leadership accordingly. So I do want to reassure everyone out there that, everybody on our ship is going to be taken care of. We have everybody from childcare experts to the best and brightest minds in medicine. And my only regret is that you will not receive the same care that we on the ship receive. So please don't be at all concerned about us. Do what you can to survive yourself, and know that you are in our thoughts. And we'll do our best. Yeah, did you have something else to say, Lamar?
Oh, no, Captain. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Not on that point.
All right, fantastic. All right. So, moving on the agenda
Although
here.
if we're still
Go ahead.
discussing the elements of the government system, the one comment you made that did somewhat concern me is this notion that that we're having lots of popular votes on the more moral issues. I think that's possibly understandable, but I also think that it may be important to establish more specifically, what kind of rights we're looking to produce and make sure are in place, because as we know, the majority does not always like to do the right thing as opposed as regards to a lot of what people's rights should be.
That's true.
A bill of
charter. That's the way these things are typically handled, as I understand.
I mean, in short, sometimes people are too stupid to vote in their own self-interests, in their own best interests. It's just the nature of humanity. I don't know. As a leader, I feel like if I'm not good at something, I'm not good at talking to civilians. So who do I have here? A civilian relations expert who is fantastic at doing that. Because as a leader, I know that if I am not good at something, I need to delegate somebody to represent the best interests of the ship as a whole, because I cannot necessarily make that informed decision. Unfortunately, not everybody has that same insight into what is best for the ship. So we are going to have to establish something where everybody's voices are represented without these really stupid decisions being made. Look, owning that the civilian union will certainly have a seat at the table in future discussions, that's certainly a valid concern. So how do we determine, how do we ensure that people are just not making decisions that are even self-destructive? We got to do something.
Well, all I can tell you is what history suggests, which is that you have to have a charter that outlines the basic responsibilities, duties, and rights of the people who choose to sign on as part of the chariot. And then a governmental structure wherein representatives are named to a small councillor group, which is empowered to make large, important decisions on behalf of the project within certain specified areas. And what the procedure is for being elected to or appointed to the council, the procedure for people being removed. Until that's in place, you're going to have these questions. You're going to have people arguing silly things. But basically it boils down to, if I sign on to Chariot, what are my rights? What are my responsibilities? What is the governmental structure? How does it change?
Exactly. I think it's somewhat difficult to exactly write out a constitution.
Well, I would offer Commander that we already have somebody who's done that for us, and it's a pretty decent one.
Yeah, I can certainly yank them from the archives. There are a number of compacts built around exploration and such through history that may be applicable as well. I think surely we have some legal expertise among the passengers who would be willing to put this together in documentary.
I understand we do have a constitutional scholar on board, and we have several educators who have offered some guidance and advice in this matter.
So, appoint a committee to draft a document and provisions to include. Let's have a charter.
Fantastic. Could I get a volunteer to serve to represent the interests of the military contingent of Chariot?
I think so.
I'd be happy to do so.
It is my job.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure with all three of you, our interests will be well represented.
Oh, I have plenty enough work to do. If someone else will take it, I'm happy to relegate that.
And I would certainly defer to the commander in this regard if he would prefer to take it.
I would love to have your advice as well.
You will certainly have my advice. Put you nominally on the committee, or you actually on the committee, and I'll just be your assistant. That's fine.
All right, Commander, you're on the committee, but please take into consideration the opinions of our other crew members present. And fantastic. I'm sure that we'll have all of that well in hand. So, Civilian Union, please know that we are working to ensure that everybody has a seat at this discussion. Look, for all of my experience, like I do want you to know that I am perfectly equipped, programmed to treat people with a sense of fairness and equality, and that is truly a reason why I have fought for so long, to ensure that people do have a voice. I don't really like to talk about the details too much of what I've been through, but I do feel like it's necessary to say that it wasn't for no reason. It's not because I enjoy killing people. I don't. That's not. No one. I don't think many people enjoy war. It's just that I'm exceptionally good at it as a means of conflict resolution when everything else fails, and that's a role that I play. It just so happens that in the world that in the world in which we live, that is the primary defining role of my life. I have sacrificed a great deal in my life to ensure that I am entirely devoted to that goal and to nothing else. And hey, until Chariot came along, that was all I really had time for. So cut me a break, all right, Union. And if you want me to act more human, as you say, if you're that worried about my nature, just give me time. But you can't fight me on my flaws and then say I'm not human enough. I've been dealing with this a lot on my own, so just cut me a bit of slack, all right? Okay, all right. Now that that's settled, we've also had some questions about how much cargo each passenger is permitted to bring, and this has come to question because, as we've been discussing, our recreational activities and designated cargo that some of us military officials have brought on board, it looks like the passengers are asking for to bring on stuff like extra bedding because they want a blanket from home. They want to bring pets that have been previously unapproved. They want some creature comforts, as they call them. They want some previously unapproved cooking supplies, such as double the amount of cocoa, for example. So while I feel like we need to make some concessions, we also have rules that we need to live by, and I can't sacrifice space or, I can't sacrifice health, medical equipment, essential operations, backups of our systems and our the machines that we need to operate to survive. I need people to understand that we can't sacrifice those things, but we are being asked to include some other things. The reports indicate that yes, we can have extra storage space on the ship. It will slow down our journey. I don't know if that matters to us. It's probably going to matter to our grandchildren when they're 83 years old and may or may not make it to a planet. So I would like to consider that. But, yeah, so it looks like to submit to these demands would mean delaying our arrival by 5 to 10 years based upon ship modifications, and we need to decide if we want to do this.
How long is it going to take already again?
It will be several generations. I mean, it's an estimate, so it's like our grandchildren or their children.
So say like 60 years?
Yeah, it's going to be a while. And this can push it up to like 65 or 70 years, which for some people is the difference between seeing Proxima B and not.
For a lot of us, I assume. So, I think certain things can be put to a vote on this, actually. I would say that something like somebody wants paying more cocoa, that's not really going to be a problem. But things like unapproved pets, there's probably a reason why we did not approve those pets in the first place. Why Chariot did not approve those pets in the first place, and there needs to be some understanding of the requirements that have to be enforced.
Requirements from prior chariots have just been with regards to size, simply by consumption of resources. The more large pets are brought on, the fewer people can go.
Exactly.
It's a straight trade-off. How many? If two people bring a big dog, that means one fewer passenger. Since the point here is to provide a viable colony at the end, that argues very strongly that we cannot, bring large pets on board. We can certainly bring them on board as frozen embryos or as genetic data, so that our descendants will have big dogs if that's what they want to do. But chipboard-wise, they're very difficult to justify.
Yeah, and outside of anything, obviously, the potentially dangerous things that people might have, I think that there's a certain value to giving the blanket, you get X many number of volume at X many number of mass, just so it doesn't look like there's any particular kinds of choice-making or discrimination between what people want to then bring.
Yeah, animals can't just fit into cubic and mass, though.
Right, but that clearly, I think,
have ongoing consumption of resources.
Yes, I understand, Lieutenant, but there's definitely also a place for saying, hey, if there's some way to transfer your current animals' genetic material into our stockpiles, that could be perhaps make it a contest, or that could be sort of a added plus for certain people willing to volunteer more in some way.
And people were warned, right? I mean, this was part of the application process that you would not necessarily get to bring friends, family, pets, etc. with you. I mean, the understanding is that you would make provisions to care for any children or pets that you may leave behind. So the fact that some people haven't done this, or that they're still asking, makes me question whether they're even fit for this mission. This is ridiculous at this point. Why don't we make a certain allowance, if possible, for more cargo room if they want, but make it, kind of minor.
Well, the cubic, the amount of weight in cubic there that each passenger is allowed to have is pretty strongly spelled out. And giving people extra allowances is going to simply mean others will clamor to have the same thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Of all the things on the charter, that's been spelled out at the hardest of them all. You have so much weight, you have so much cubic.
Well, I have an idea. Some people, maybe we don't change how much each passenger can bring, but maybe we make an allowance so that some passengers may donate their allotment to others. That seems fair.
Or market it in some way.
That's not. Yeah, you will have people. But
if you want to sell it for Earth money you're not going to really need for a long while, I think that's perfectly okay.
I mean, they could sell it for Earth money and then leave that Earth money with their families.
It's reasonable, down to a certain amount. We don't want anyone to sell off their entire allotment and not have the things that they need to get by.
Essentially, we should figure out what each allotment a person has and what they can theoretically do without, and then open up that to.
As regards frozen embryos, frozen genetic material, and especially genetics data, the Chariot can accommodate as much of that as we desire to maintain. the cryo, once you've set up the cryo facilities, adding, a few dozen or even 100 embryos or other genetic samples really doesn't change the demands of the system at all.
So functionally, I also understand we're not particularly concerning ourselves with any additional time this may bring about.
If it's keeping to the same amount of mass that we're originally allotting, then it shouldn't change the mission parameters.
Yeah, I mean,
That's correct.
If people want to pool their mass in order to do something, it's just the, really the pets that was the sticking issue because of the ongoing consumption of resources. It's not just a keeping thing or a weight thing, rather.
That's true. There are a certain amount I understand that are approved of animals to bring on board. Most of them are on board not for comfort, but for consumption. And look,
most of even those are relatively few. So most of the meat is essentially synthetic.
Mm-hmm. And look, if people want to adopt a pet cow, that's fine. The cow is eventually going to be eaten. Yeah. I mean, that's gonna...
Right, the cattle and such on board ship are there for practice. As much as anything else, just as our tiny little quote farm. Yes, it's just to allow people to get some familiarity and some experience with some of the things that eventually we're going to need to do on Proxima.
Well, I mean, we are going to have hydroponics. We have a fairly large hydroponics.
Oh, we have the hydroponics and the algae vats are the basic frame of sustenance for the ship. That's why I'm saying our little bitty farm is essentially there so people can see what it's like to grow plants in the dirt. It's not there to really feed anybody.
As long as the nutritional requirements for all of the people on board are met, any free space in the hydroponic bays can be devoted to more luxurious items like spices or cocoa, for instance, or coffee. The only requirement is that we meet everybody's nutritional requirements. Beyond that, extra farming space can be devoted to things that are large.
Don't forget malt.
Yes, of course. And
maybe a little bit of hops.
To a certain extent, we can put this to a vote, a democratic vote. We have X amount of free hydroponic space currently. Vote for the things that you wish to have over the next few years.
I don't know.
If there's no beer or whiskey production on board ship, you're going to have a revolt about halfway there.
And I'll be leading that. Yeah, you know me fairly well.
I think Pruno will find its way, sirs. I am a little concerned, just in the history of my experience with people trading in stores that were creating extra allotment space to do their own side projects and things like this. Has not gone over particularly well in a lot of cases. I think people often overestimate what they can and cannot accomplish in sort of limited additional space as opposed to going with all their committed space for their official projects. So that would be my concern.
Well, for some reason the civilians seem to have such a concern with this. We're going to need you to manage their expectations a little bit here.
Understood, Captain.
I mean, the people in the military understand. You just have to get the civilians to understand that you have very little private space on board a ship. That there will be plenty of communal space to do almost anything that we've been talking about. But it won't, but there's, the only place that is yours, really yours, is your bed, and the only things that are really yours are things that can fit in relatively small space. That everything else will have to be in common. And there'll be plenty of room, for people to have their own, a great variety of activities there. It's not going to be full privacy as people used to.
And look, some of us have been through this whole war hero thing. Some of us have done a lot behind the scenes and haven't maybe had the recognition for the significance that they have perpetuated. However, a lot of these civilians on board here, they don't understand that just by virtue of being on Chariot, they are now public figures. You know, their names are on the roster. Their names are out there, and I'm sure they're getting all sorts of pressures and offers and things like that some of us have a lot of experience with, and some of us have developed our own coping mechanisms for, but these people haven't yet. So I sympathize, and for any of you listening, I do sympathize. I have lived the last several years of my life this way. I understand what it's like to have people asking for these things from you. But, look, at the end of the day, there's only so much privacy you get on an operation like this, especially while we're still in range, in communications range. Forget about it. Like, it's just not going to happen. If you are on Chariot, we know the importance of certain things, of staying social and looking forward to the future and being optimistic when we know we're going to live and die on the ship. What does that mean? Okay, great. You want to move forward with the approved genetic reproduction process, and you meet somebody and you decide to reproduce the traditional way. Don't think that's not going to be broadcast for everyone to see. I mean, not every activity there, but people are going to be interested in that. Who's seeing who, and who's going to dinner with whom, and who switched jobs, who got a bad performance report. There's going to be a little Big Brother aspect to it that we're just going to have to own up and deal with. Like, hey, I've managed to make it through the last several years with this. You can too. I actually feel like it'll have a negative social effect while we're in communications range, and that we might be a little bit behind on some of our goals as a result, but I don't want it to distract us. We just have to kind of deal with it and move forward. Our legacy isn't on Earth. Our legacy is in what we are striving towards. And, that's another planet. So, look, so, go ahead.
And honestly, once Chariot Zeta launches, nobody on Earth is ever going to interact with you in person ever again. Frankly, I realize it will matter to people, but you can't allow what happens on Earth to affect you once you've left it. It's
right.
Yeah, and it's just the nature of the business, and while digital relationships in this era are extremely important, and the way that we're initiating our time together right now, even, we have to really emphasize the importance of our time together on Chariot. That's what this is about.
Captain?
Yes.
Permission for a private conversation.
A private conversation.
Just a brief one. I won't take you away from everybody else for very long.
All right.
Yeah, I can step out. It's not an issue.
All right.
Thank you.
Granted.
Commander, permission?
Yeah, granted. I will check out.
Captain, permission to speak freely.
This is unexpected, but nevertheless granted.
What's the matter?
I found out I was a machine a few weeks ago. So, hell, I've been drinking a lot, haven't I?
You've been drinking a lot. You've been talking about drinking a lot. You've been venting.
I've been holding it together so that I can get the job done. That's what I've been doing my entire life.
If I may be frank.
Go ahead.
You need to put a better public face on it. And if you need help from me or anybody else, you have it. But you can't, you're the face of this project. You can't carry on like that, especially in front of, in front of other people that are involved in this project, in front of witnesses.
I wasn't the one that chose to replicate such a flawed individual to do this.
Fuck that, Captain, please. Okay, and we're all flawed. We all have our problems. And you can have all the problems you want in private. You just can't have them in front of other people. That's my opinion. You can tell me to stuff it if you want to. You're the captain. But people need to have faith in this project if it's going to work. And you're the face. You're the one they look to. And they have to see someone who is completely in control, completely in command, cool, calm, collected. You just can't do this in front of other people. As I said, you've got all the support in the world. If you need help, if you want to shove parts of this job, if you want to shove all of this job off onto other people, then you can, and we'll do it. There's no question about that.
I understand, but just from a personal perspective, I've been holding this together for a while, and now you just kind of come back into the picture and expect me to take your advice. Where were you 3 months ago?
Yes, I do, because you said yes. Okay? You didn't have to accept me. And I didn't, and you're right, I didn't expect to go on this project. Okay? It was a very last minute thing.
And you think I would just leave you behind on Earth?
No.
With you asking me to take you. How could I do that? Then what kind of person would I be?
The captain of the ship who didn't want disruption from her past. I would have understood that it wasn't personal. So I'll say no. We haven't lifted.
I'm not going to do that. Don't just...
Okay. I won't. And you have my support. You have my support in everything. But you just can't answer your problems. People need to see you in charge. They need to, delegate whatever you want. And, drink in your cabin and vent to people in private, but not in an open forum like this.
Fine, but what's the extra cargo? What's the cargo?
You sure you want to know?
Yeah, and look, your concern is noted, and I'm going to act on it because it's not bad advice.
Okay, that's as much as I can ask. Thank you for listening.
I need honesty from you as much as you can provide.
I will give you as much as you. I've had to hold back a lot from you in the past. I recognize this because of my job, but I've quit, and I don't have to keep it from you anymore.
All right, what's in the cargo?
More Emily's.
Wow. So what? Something happens to me, you just activate another one? What's the objective? What's the reason for having more Emily's? This one too flawed for you professionally or personally?
No. Well, let me ask this question. Why do you think that you're in charge of every chariot?
Well, somebody must have thought I was qualified and realistic enough to get the job done. I'm good at my job.
You have Rella Hogcross at the Z Factor. I haven't had a personal conversation with him on this. It's a combination of characteristics that makes people trust you. That makes people believe you and have faith in you, which is more important than almost any skill set. Anyone going in on this project has to believe in it because, among other things, the original participants aren't going to see the end of it. Mostly.
So that's the reason for there being more Emily's. It's not a thing I could teach or exemplify.
You'd have to no. It's a combination of genetics and experience. you can't give either of those to anybody else. I mean, it might be that somebody else here has it, but it's just sheer luck. Your skill set's important, not only now but going forward, and that's why. And this is not official. You understand?
I understand. I just can't believe that you thought
there
that
are a lot. They made a lot of copies. You know that by now. I don't understand why they didn't tell you at the beginning.
Because you know how I am. I gotta be focused on the job.
Yes, but how can you be focused on the job if you don't know what's going on? And believe me, I completely understand where you're coming from.
I just can't believe that you thought that I would ever consider saying no to your request.
It's your prerogative. You know, if you decided, okay, this is a complication from my past that I cannot deal with now because I've moved on, or because my duties don't permit the personal, I would have understood.
Even if it wasn't personal, I don't leave you behind. That's not who I am. And that's why I think they picked me.
I applied to the Chariot here because I have nowhere else to go. I can't stand to do what I did anymore.
We're gonna have to square with all those things we did.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I'm not sorry for any of the things that I did in the line of duty. Not that. But it's difficult to find, well, once you're betrayed, where do you go from there?
To a bottle of whiskey.
Nope.
Or water if you have to.
Never. The cargo has tamper seals on it. No one's going to go in there. Only you and the EXO can override them without a laser torch.
That's. I trust you on the security of that.
They appear on the manifest as, as automation supplies.
I trust you on the security that I trust myself to not feel threatened by them.
So I need to do one other thing with your permission.
Mm-hmm.
Captain O'Sullivan, this is Worker. Please access administrative mode.
Administrative mode accessed. State your command.
Please receive the following data patch: RJ15PQFT.V2. Transmitting now.
Receiving. This update will take approximately 30 seconds.
Please acknowledge status when complete.
Transmitting. Objective overrided. Security code. Clearance required.
Please accept following security code: QAWJT22515.
Security clearance accepted. Transmission complete. Update complete. Terminate connection.
Terminate connection. Please return to standard interactive mode.
Standard interactive mode. Commencing. The thing that people aren't going to understand is they'll accept an AI who can capture the mannerisms and emotions of a person, but what if they found out that as an AI, I could feel love? They can't find out that. That'll scare people. That'll terrify them. People wouldn't mind an AI being used for work or for sex or for something very cut and dry, but to find out something as complex and nuanced and complicated as how I felt about you will change things in a very, very dramatic way. And I'm not worried about Earth. I'm worried about Chariot ZETA.
I know. That's one of the reasons you might say no.
I didn't say no, and I'm not going to say no, so.
All right. Well, we don't ever have to talk about that if you don't want to.
Agreed. That's fine. That's understandable.
Thank you.
And I wouldn't want to cause you any more difficulty anyway.
You're not,
so.
you're not causing me any difficulty whatsoever. Please don't think so. It's I that have importuned you here, not the other way around.
It's my job, and I do my job well, so it's not a problem.
Yes, you do. And you do your job well, and I just urge you to make sure everybody else sees that.
Understood. Well, unless you have anything else that you need to relay to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, and I'm glad you asked.
It'll be good to work with you. Thank you.
It'll have its challenges, but it'll overall be the best thing for the crew.
Understood.
All right, let's go ahead and bring everyone else back online. All right. I'm going to go ahead and resume the call. Gentlemen, if you want to return, join us. I'll enable that right now. You should be able to be back on now. Hello?
Yes, Captain.
Hi. Yeah, we just had to discuss some kind of high-level logistics that you might be clued in on later or not. Couldn't really do that on the feed. We are coming up to 3:15, and we have a scheduled break in our transmission about now. Before we do that, I'd like to know if anybody else has any issues they want to discuss. Otherwise, I'm just going to pull up some things from the news feed for our agenda when we resume shortly.
Agenda items are fine by me, Captain.
All right, because I have a long list of civilian concerns. So I didn't anticipate this being that difficult. I kind of thought people could kind of follow the rules, but we'll go ahead and bring those up. And yeah, so great. If anybody else has any agenda items or concerns they would like to pose, just shoot those onto the private crew feed, and I'll make sure they get included. So for everybody watching, let me go back to that feed and make sure we don't have any other questions in here because we had something earlier. Okay, for everybody watching, and I do appreciate those of you who have followed the feed. Thank you for following us. Yeah, throw out any questions that you want us to discuss after the break. We're going to end this transmission shortly, but we'll be back after probably about 10 minutes, just taking a little break here. Yeah, I can't. I need a minute too, so let's break for about 10 minutes, and we'll be right back. Out of game. I'm gonna go ahead and switch it to out of game, and I'm gonna end stream in a second here. And I'm just gonna keep the. Hang on 1 second here. Okay, we're out of game, and I'm ending stream.